If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold, so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.
Problem legitimately raised. Huge levels of unemployment. That's correct. High levels of crime. That's correct. But the finger is being pointed at wrong people. The levels of high unemployment in this country are not due. They are not due to undocumented Africans. They are not.
I would like to begin by saying it's important to respect the elders all the time, because I grew up knowing that the elders have more knowledge than us. They have more experience than us. However, I would like to differ a little bit, because there's absolutely nothing wrong to express your opinion, because I may agree with you today and disagree with you tomorrow, because my thinking is always independent, because I don't want to be manipulated, because we've been manipulated for many years, for hundreds and hundreds of years. The elder, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, has illustrated the relationship that him and his comrades had all over Africa. And indeed, it was beautiful. It was fantastic. In other words, those experiences were okay for him. And the way he has explained them, indeed, we can say they were good. Those are beautiful memories. However, I differ when it comes to this thing of unemployment, the causes of unemployment, that the causes of unemployment are not caused by undocumented foreigners here in South Africa. I beg to differ. You know why? It's because it's not only just about undocumented, but it's about the Constitution. What does the Constitution say about employment in South Africa? Who should be employed here in South Africa based on the Constitution? Because you have to bear in mind that even if we disagree with the Constitution, but when it comes to the law of employment here in South Africa, the Constitution is about protecting South Africa, making sure that employment is managed in a fair way, in a fair manner. In other words, that South Africans are employed in numbers so that they are not affected by unemployment rate or by high unemployment rate. So that is why we have those laws that are governing employment. It doesn't mean if you have a company, you have to do as you please. You have to do everything the way you want to. But you have to follow the rules and regulations that governs employment, how you should employ people and what procedure you should follow, and what about the health and safety and many other things that are associated with employment rules and regulations. So when it comes to employment, according to South African Constitution, is that when it comes to those jobs that don't require, or that doesn't require a special skill, those jobs should be reserved for South Africans. For an example, to become a cashier, to become a petrol attendant, to become like a teacher, in other words, and so forth and so forth, and so forth and so forth. Even when it comes to general work, it can be plumbing, it can be construction. Those jobs should be reserved for South Africans. And right now, we know that when it comes to us, South Africans, in other words, the indigenous black people of the land, we don't have power when it comes to economy, because nothing was done in 1994. It was all about empowering big companies. So these politicians at that time, they put their hopes on these companies so that these big companies can employ us. So that is why they didn't take time to restructure the economy so that black people can enter into the economic sphere in numbers, so that we can run the economy, so that the majority of the people in this country can run the economy. So they didn't do that at all. So what they did is to invest upon these companies. And some of these guys, they bought shares in some of these companies, or were given shares in some of these companies. So as a result, South Africans expected these companies to employ them according to the rules and regulations of the Labor Department, or according to the Constitution, that when it comes to those skills that doesn't require any specialty, they are reserved for South Africans. So in other words, if you are a non-South African, you come from another country, it can be Australia, Nigeria, Japan, or Zimbabwe. When you come and work here in South Africa, you have to follow the right procedure. In other words, you have to be employed in a rare skill category, a special engineer, a special teacher. In other words, someone with you have to be someone who has a certain specialty or a certain special skill. This is according to the law. We have to understand that in any country, a constitution should be respected, should be honored by everyone. And anyone who disagrees with the constitution, anyone who breaks the constitution, that particular person is regarded as a corrupt individual. That particular person is regarded as a rebel. We all know that in all these countries. But now, when it comes to South Africa here, it's just a bit different now. Why? Because even those who are documented, they don't have like work visa. They don't have, even if they get a work visa, they get a work visa that doesn't comply with the Constitution. Because the Constitution states it clearly that you must have a rare skill. Otherwise, all these other jobs are reserved for South Africans in all these companies. As I've said, that unfortunately, we don't run these companies. We don't run the economy of South Africa. So what happens? The majority of these companies, many of these companies, you can go to the factories, various companies in Johannesburg. You can go to Pretoria. You can go to Germiston. You can go to all these. You can go to Olifants. You can go to all these big factories. Go and inspect who is working in those companies, who is doing a general work in those companies. Majority of the people who are working in those companies, they are from Mozambique, they are from Zimbabwe and other countries here in Africa. then you ask yourself, are these companies following the Constitution? They are not. Right now, we are not even talking about those who are not documented. We are still talking about those who are documented. Because we have to understand, we have to put feelings aside, but we have to honor the Constitution. So what the government should do is to change the Constitution. They have to change the Constitution so that everybody can do as they want, so that you can hire anyone from wherever, regardless of the skill they have. But instead, they are not doing that. Why? Because they are afraid that this whole thing will cause chaos, or people will start realizing that they are not in favor of the South Africans. This is what is happening. But now you have to understand, a small hole not dealt with in time becomes a big hole, much more difficult to fix. So now most of these companies, it can be in logistics, we can talk about the factories, we can talk about all these companies, or many of these companies have decided to employ people from other countries who look like me. Do they love them? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They don't love them, but they want to maximize the profit, because the focus of these companies is the profit. They want to make sure that they have money. If they can secure the bag, everything is okay. So who should they target? They have to target the one who doesn't have rights, the one who cannot go to SAPS, the one who cannot go to court, the one who cannot go to Labor Department. In other words, the one who doesn't have a voice, the one who doesn't have a choice, the one who will agree to each and everything they say, the one who will work over time, no matter they are tired or what, they will just keep on working. This is slavery. How can I describe it? Why? Because they try by all means to avoid labor laws. They try by all means to avoid minimum wage. They try by all means to avoid all these things. So now, if all these companies that were expected from 1994 to hire thousands or millions of South Africans are now shifting to this new behavior of hiring people from outside because they want to maximize the profit, who is going to suffer? Is it a parliamentarian? Is it Mr. Thabo Mbeki who has benefits? Is it someone who is staying at Sandton? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The people who will suffer are those on the ground, those who vote for these political parties. Millions and millions of South Africans. So that is why right now they are getting retrenched. They are replaced by who? Because these companies now, they have this tendency of like retrenching South Africans. And when they are asked why, they complain about the resources, that they have a shortage of resources. They have to sell their trucks, they have to sell their cars. When in reality, that's not the case. In reality, they are just lying. Why? Because they want to replace after the South Africans have been retrenched, they want to replace them with the group of people from outside. Why? So that they can maximize the profit. So because they've realized that South Africa is a banana republic. In other words, you can do whatever you want. So what I'm trying to say is that even if you are documented, according to the Constitution, you have to get a work visa that is legitimate. In other words, the work visa that is showing that you are in an investment in this country, the skill that you have is only few people here in South Africa who have that kind of a skill. It's not referring to a general work. So here we are using logic. We are using logic. So now, if all the South Africans, not all, let me just put it in this way. If all the companies here in South Africa start behaving like this, obvious, the South Africans will suffer, will get unemployed. So that is why the high rate of unemployment is caused by companies hiring people from outside in numbers in order to replace the South Africans. Then as a result, the South Africans get unemployed. And the moment they become aware of what is happening, the moment they become aware of what is happening, then the frustration will start to build up. So what you see right now in South Africa is not something that started about 2 years ago or 3 years ago or maybe 5 years ago. In other words, this whole thing started more than 20 years ago. This frustration started more than 20 years ago or about 20 years ago. So the frustration will build up. The frustration will build up. Then the moment it takes place, the moment, in other words, the frustration breaks out there, then it causes chaos. It becomes uncontrollable. You cannot control it. So at that time, the shortest way to describe it, or the simplest way to describe it at that time, it would be to say, you know what, this is xenophobia. Why? Because you are not focusing on the root of the problem. Go to Johannesburg right now, Germiston, other companies around Midrand. You can go to OnlyFans. You can go to all these factories. Then just count the number of South Africans who are working in those companies, and compare that number with the number of non-South Africans working in those companies. You will be shocked. You will start realizing that these companies are taking advantage of the corruption that is happening in South Africa. And if it's done by these big companies, they know the penalties that they may face as a result, but they are not afraid. Why they're not afraid? There's a high possibility that these people have relationships with the governors, in other words, those who have power. Right now, we are not just talking about whether you are documented or undocumented. Now we are talking about those who are documented. 90% of them, they're not supposed to be working for those companies. Then as a result, if you keep on submitting your CV until you give up, until you decide to stay at home, until you decide to start like developing a new behavior of waking up around like maybe 11 a.m. is because you have given up already. Then others will start labeling you as lazy, that you are lazy. Right now, we are still just talking about employment. It's just talking about employment, that when it comes to employment, you have to follow these laws according to Labor Department. And right now, we have a new tendency again when it comes to tenderpreneurs, when it comes to construction companies. These construction companies, whenever they do projects, they run their projects for government. Right now, they have a new tendency of hiring people from outside as well. Just imagine you are working in my community. Maybe you are renewing an infrastructure, or you are maintaining an infrastructure, but you don't hire the people in that area. You don't hire the people in that area, but instead, you don't even bring maybe people from other areas in South Africa, but you bring people from other countries who don't have a work visa. In other words, who are not even known by Labor Department. You hire them. Why? Because you are allowed by yourself to pay them whatever you want to pay them. So these people, even if they are old, they can still lie. It's possible for an old man, an old woman to lie. It's possible. I'm not trying to underestimate our elders, but it's still possible. There's no truth here. That is why I always say, try by all means to align with the truth, because if you are aligned with the truth, you'll always use your common sense. That is why I say, I may disagree with you today and agree with you tomorrow. In other words, I cannot say just because we agreed yesterday, we have to continue. In other words, we have to agree all the time. It doesn't work like that. In other words, you are going to manipulate me. In other words, you are going to capture my mind. So I have to try by all means to make sure that my thinking capacity is always independent. Then now we come to small businesses. Bear in mind, when it comes to big companies, we don't have power. Now we have small businesses in our townships, in our small towns. So those small businesses, according to the Constitution, they should be, like, for an example, operated by the South Africans. Why? It doesn't mean everyone will be employed. So these small businesses are playing a role so that people can sustain themselves, so that people can take care of themselves, because at the end of the day, we have to understand that it's not everybody who will get employed, even if your economy is flourishing, even if your economy is doing well. But it's important to understand that at the end of the day, no one will get employed. For an example, let's say maybe you are still young, you are students, and maybe it's 30 of you in the same class. It doesn't mean all of you will become professors. It doesn't mean all of you you'll have diplomas and degrees and etc. Some will have to, like, for an example, go and work somewhere and become a plumber. Others will go out there and register their small businesses, and some will, like, come out of that school and become inventors, something like that. So same applies when it comes to small businesses here in South Africa. Those businesses that are in our townships, they were reserved for us so that we can operate them. So that is why there's a rule that says when you come to South Africa as a non-South African, you must be an investment. Why? It's because that is why there's this rule that you must invest approximately 5 million and above, or 5 million and above. This is the amount of money that you should invest here in South Africa in order for you to qualify to register a business or run a business here in South Africa. Why it's so? So that you don't compete with those who are running township businesses, because township businesses are reserved for them. So that is why they had to set up this criteria so that there is no friction between the outsiders and the South Africans. So in other words, when you come and run your business, in other words, you have 5 million and above, and you are going to hire like 60 to 70% of the South Africans in your company. But right now, those who are coming outside, they are competing with South Africans. They even threaten South Africans to shut down their businesses so that they can take over those businesses. This is a big problem. Then as a result, unemployment goes up. Why? Because those businesses are there so that, for an example, if you don't get employed, maybe you can come up with an alternative to say, let me start my business. Let me run a spaza shop. Let me just run a tuck shop. Let me just sell something on the streets as a hustler. So according to the Constitution, you cannot come to South Africa as an outsider. We are not against African unity, but you cannot come to South Africa as an outsider and then you call yourself a hustler. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because now you are going to start competing with South African hustlers. So the Constitution was like developed in such a way in order to protect the South Africans. So the South Africans down there, as they are busy running their small economies, they can just continue hiring one another in order to reduce unemployment, in order not to put pressure on those big companies. But right now, those small companies, small businesses, tuck shops, and spaza shops are operated by the outsiders. And these big companies right now, what are they doing? They hire the outsiders. Then as a result, many South Africans are sitting at home. Even if you get your 350 from the government, you have to spend it on that tuck shop that is not operated by South Africans. Then as a result, the frustration builds up. The frustration builds up. And now, the moment it explodes, the moment the frustration explodes, it becomes like a tornado. It becomes like a volcano. It becomes uncontrollable.
We know the history in detail of how South Africa, 1994 to 2000, 2008, 2009, the country goes up like this. Growth rates reach 6%. From 2009 goes the opposite direction. Doesn't cause by undocumented immigrants. The people.
We have to bear in mind that President Mbeki is considered as the best president ever. So that is why in 2009, the graph had to go down, because he's considered as the best president ever. They don't have errors. They didn't make mistakes. In other words, these people did not sell out, according to them and according to many people. That is why the graph from 1994, under the administration of Nelson Mandela, the graph was going up. But in 2009, in other words, President Mandela and President Mbeki were perfect. That is why I don't like politics. That is why I don't like politicians. Because they will try by all means to manipulate your mind. And I'm trying by all means to hold myself so that I'm not disrespectful, so that at the end of the day, I don't end up saying things that I shouldn't be saying. But here is the thing, we have to know that these people are dangerous. So that is why you have to listen attentively. So the moment they speak, you have to make sure that you listen attentively, because these guys, they can just play with your minds like that. So that is why at the beginning of his lecture, he had to talk about the relationships they had in Africa. And those relationships didn't even make sense to me. So that is why I didn't even want to like talk about those relationships or to review those relationships. But now you can tell that he's trying by all means to manipulate our minds so that we can end up believing that we don't have a problem here. We don't have a problem here. Yes, probably the graph went down in 2009. Why the graph went down in 2009 is because the one who took over was not expected to take over. So all these years, they had been trying by all means to prevent him from taking over. You have to bear in mind that these people are thieves. The system is very dangerous. If the system doesn't like you, they will pretend as if the rand is dropping so that people can be afraid, so that others can sell their shares, so that all people can be like, for an example, intimidated. So that at the end of the day, they can tell that, you see, now you are unemployed. It's because of this person you have chosen. It's because they don't like you. That is why in politics, there's this word, sabotage. In other words, they will sabotage you. This is what many people, French people, have been trying to do in Burkina Faso. This is what they are trying to do in Niger and Mali. They want to sabotage those leaders so that at the end of the day, they can say to the people, you see, you shouldn't have allowed them to take over. They want us to say, look at what Ibrahim Traore has done. He has failed. They want us to say that. This is how the system operates. The system doesn't have mercy. Even if an angel can come and take over, they will always try by all means to prove to us that this angel is bad. This angel doesn't supposed to take over. I'm not referring to Jacob Zuma as an angel, but what I'm trying to say is that Jacob Zuma was not expected to take over. They tried by all means to prevent him from taking over. I've been following the politics of Jacob Zuma since I was 12 years old. Not because I'm like it. He's perfect. No. Not because I think he's perfect or I think he is the best president. But I'm trying to make you to understand why the graph went down. If the system doesn't like you, they will like create this thing so that you can see that graph going down. But what I can say to you is that the frustration was there even during the times of Mr. Thabo Mbeki. Why? Because these companies, they started taking advantages in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, when they realized that no, ANC is not doing anything special. Because you have to understand that between 1994 and the year 2000, many companies were still following the rules. In other words, they were afraid of the new government because they had expected the new government to pull the trigger. because some of these people didn't trust ANC to the fullest. In other words, they had expected ANC to do something to those who had oppressed our forefathers. But when they realized from 2000, from the year 2000, when they realized that no, ANC is like a dead snake, so we cannot be intimidated by a dead snake, they started taking advantage. They started like breaking the constitution when it comes to employment. They started realizing that they can make more money. So it doesn't mean if the frustration did not break up during your time, then it means you are perfect. Yes, it did not break up in your times, but it was there in your time. It's like even before you can vomit, if before you are about to vomit, there's something that is building up in your stomach. You start feeling uneasy. You start feeling a certain way. But maybe after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, then you start vomiting. But it doesn't mean this whole thing built up instantly and then you started vomiting. It took time. There was like a friction or war in your stomach for about maybe 5 to 10 minutes, or maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Then you start vomiting. So this frustration started during the times of Mr. Thabo Mbeki. We have that history as well. Just that I don't have time to break it down, but I have that history as well.
People who caused that, you look at it, that decline, they are laughing in a corner there. Because we're pointing not at them, but we're pointing somewhere else. It's wrong.
The truth of the matter is, if two elephants are fighting, who suffers? The grass. If the government is corrupt, is hiring corrupt officials, and these corrupt officials, they give illegitimate business visas, illegitimate permits. What do you expect? What do you expect? As time goes by, those who will suffer are the very same people you give the permits. It can happen in every country. It can happen everywhere. If now millions of us here in South Africa, we can go to Nigeria and the government of Nigeria protects us and the people of Nigeria get frustrated, who will suffer first? The government or us? Most definitely, we will be the ones to suffer first before the government. So that is why now it seems as if South Africans are xenophobic and etc. Is because the moment we are frustrated, we cannot just go to the government departments and ban them. It doesn't happen like that. In most cases, those who suffer are those who are closer to you. They become the victims. They become the victims. Why? Because they've been bribing you. They've been taking advantage as well. It's not just about employment. It's not just about money, but it's also about security. It's also about our well-being. When it comes to security, that is why I always say, when you come to South Africa, you have to know what to expect. Unless if you're going to stay in those cities or those estates that are highly protected. But right now, the security is bad because we have people who are selling drugs. And allegedly, most of these people are from outside. It has been proven multiple times. But now they want to act as if now we are xenophobic. Everybody is full of hate, when in reality it's not like that. Every community will do the same thing all over the world. When you see that your youth is being destroyed, you have people who are committing crime, you have people who are involved in all these dark things, you will be frustrated and you will try by all means to get rid of those people. I'm trying by all means to align myself with the truth, because Pan-Africanists don't align with the truth. They cannot hold people accountable. They want everybody to do as they please. They don't want to educate people. They don't want to build companies that can hire these people in their countries. Pan-Africans don't want to do anything, but Pan-Africans want to spend time on social media. Pan-Africanists want to, like, for an example, spend time asking for donations. These are Pan-Africanists, a lot of them. At the end of the day, you don't see what they are doing. Because when you talk about the likes of Marcus Garvey and many others, they woke us up. When we talk about the likes of Thomas Sankara, they talked less. They talked less. But we saw them in action. We saw them doing something. The likes of Ibrahim Traore, they are doing the very same thing. But a lot of these people, instead of like educating Africans about what is happening in South Africa, they want to say South Africans are xenophobic. They're not even walking around here. They don't know what is happening around here. They don't know about the arrogance we face every day, about people who are confident that they are not documented, that even the police know that. They walk around freely. Can you trust those people? The moment you distance yourself from such people, then you become xenophobic. But how can you be xenophobic when you allow these people to stay in your own home for a very long time? Then they want to talk about we are scared of other groups of people. Then you ask yourself now, why are you trying to shift why are you trying to shift the attention?
So it's a problem. It's a problem the South Africans must deal with. Now I'm raising it in the context. Master of ceremonies, this, that. You can imagine what the person in Guinea-Conakry says. That I now say to this Guinea-Conakry was walking the streets of Johannesburg, go home. They don't understand it. And the reason they don't understand it is because during the course of the struggle, the continent came to own South Africa. It's very, very much South African. This South African struggle was not just a South African struggle, it was their struggle.
Follow politicians at your own risk. These are just their opinions. These are just their opinions. These are just the opinions of the political party, not that of the South Africans. So that is why right now I'm like, those who are going on the streets to fight, I salute you. I salute you. But sometimes I feel like sacrificing your life can be the worst decision that you may make. Sometimes it can be a positive thing to sacrifice yourself. But look at the likes of Solomon Mahlangu. His last words. Look at the likes of Steve Biko. They sacrificed themselves, expecting that these people will be honest, will govern everything accordingly. Now, when you sacrifice yourself, those who will take over, they won't even honor you. This is what I see. Because we have a lot of opportunists who will end up talking like this in 10 years to come, in 15 years to come. How can South Africa be a burden? Or how can a South Africa bear a burden of other countries? It cannot be like that. It was their opinions. Because someone once assisted you, now you feel guilty every time you think about them, every time you see them, you feel like you can do something for them because they once helped you. That guilt is your feeling, is your opinion. It's about you. It's not about the rest of the people. Why? Because we understand that during the struggle, those who were out there, they were like out there because they decided to run away. That is why when you talk about the freedom fighters, we're talking about our grandfathers, our mothers. We talk about those who had to face apartheid daily here in South Africa. Those are the real freedom fighters. But I'm not like, for an example, shaming those who ran away. But I'm like, if you call yourself a freedom fighter, you have to understand what leadership is. You have to understand what leadership is. So before you can like say, if I tell this person to go home, then they will be surprised and shocked and etc. But if you go to these countries, when they say go back home, in other words, you have to come to your senses and go back home. And just imagine if for an example, we have as statistics, we have high crime in our places. These people are not staying in our places. In our places, we have problems every day. People are missing. Without any propaganda, when they are missing, who is involved? In most cases, are people from outside. So that is why you have to deal with these things. You have to ask yourself, how did these people come in South Africa? Are you following the visa laws? If you are working in South Africa, did you follow the labor laws? Did your company follow the constitution? Something like that. This is what South Africans want. It doesn't mean they are xenophobic. I totally disagree with the elder here, Mr. Mbeki, but because they have popularity, so many people will believe them. There's no way people can believe me. There's no way. There's no way compared to Mr. Thabo Mbeki. People will go with Thabo Mbeki. People will go with any famous Pan-Africanist. But what I can tell you is that these people from African Unity or African Union, they don't care. They don't care about African unity. They only care about cash. Because had they cared about African unity, they will make sure that they build each and every country. In other words, they build the economy of each and every country, had they cared. Because all these people who are running African Unity or African Union or African Unity or African Union or Organization of African Unity, something like that. All these people who are running this organization, they come from different countries here in Africa, but still they don't care. The presidents of all these other countries here in Africa, they don't care about unity. They don't care. They only care about oppressing their own people. And that is why when their people run to South Africa, they still don't care. Right now, they act as if they care. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. Because if you care about your people, you have to talk like Captain Ibrahim Traore. In every sentence, you have to mention your people. You have to talk about your people. In action, we have to see that you are about your people. Even those who are outside in other countries, they will come back and join you to build your country. Africa will never be united until all African countries are fully independent and their economies are running fully or operating smoothly and accordingly. As long as these countries are looking towards other countries, it's going to be a problem. Each and every country in Africa must be independent. Then afterwards, we can speak the same language. But African unity is not something which will come anytime soon. Why? Because these guys, it's all about money. It's all about cash.
If everything can be paused, I will ask the spiritual court to put death on hold so we can have time to breathe, and the rain of tears shall stop.
I have an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice and Truth. Your mediation is necessary. Pause everything for a moment.